there's a lot of change in the ecosystem. If you follow Jay McBain from Canalys, you hear him talk about how today's B2B buyer goes through, I think it was an average of 28 key moments before selecting a vendor. And many of those moments actually happen with or through partners. So if you think about your partners providing very early education in terms of awareness, or actually much deeper into the buyer journey in terms of providing a demo, doing a solution design, providing a proof of concept, these kind of pre-sale touch points are increasingly critical in today's more complex sale. And then, of course, you've got the post-sales portion, right? Jay also talks about how a mid-market or enterprise customer now trusts up to 7 partners throughout their journey. And not all of them, in fact, most of them won't be transactable. And so many of these partners are performing roles that I think traditionally, it's fair to say, have gone unrecognized in many incentive programs. So my question for the panel, do you think about today's topic, and we talk about maximizing partner performance, how are you tailoring your incentive strategy to reflect these new realities? And I think, Brian, let's start with you, and then I'll move on to the rest of the panel, right? How do you recognize, how do you reward the full range of partner roles and the value that they bring across the entire partner journey?
Yeah, I mean, it's a really good question, Margaret. And I think even before answering that question, I think we all have to recognize kind of what systems we have in place to be able to measure the partners in different parts of the journey. I'll speak alone to what our experience has been here at SentinelOne, but there are certainly some parts of that journey where we have really good information about the particular performance or the particular attribution of something that a partner has done. And there are others where, quite frankly, it's a little bit harder to discern. And we don't have quite the processes and the workflows to be able to measure that. And so what we have been able to do is, obviously there's been a huge focus on pre-sales. I think from our very beginning, we've been able to have really good information on not just partner sourcing of opportunities, leads, deal registrations, depending on how you call it in your organization, through the ability to launch a proof of concept or through launching a proof of value, depending again on how you discern it, all the way through figuring out what's actually on a closed won opportunity. Similarly, understanding who is actually involved with that particular opportunity, whether you're talking about an individual sales rep, whether you're talking about an individual solution engineer, to focusing on particular focus partners, whether that's a reseller, a managed service provider, or a distributor. And then ultimately figuring out all the way through, how are they being able to transact? So how are we leveraging incentives to reward behavior for, say, purchasing off of a cloud marketplace, where it's super important for us as an organization? And so, but again, each step along the way, we think about, okay, what are the tools that are available to us? What's actually able to get into our CRM system to be able to track and be able to transparently show to a partner, hey, this is what you've earned at what point in the journey, so that we can then reward and talk about that behavior and message that out more broadly to the teams, not just internally, but also externally to the partners as well.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry.
Go ahead,
yeah,
Margaret.
Go, Ali. No, you go, Ali.
Sorry about that. I was just going to echo. I think, everything that Brian just mentioned is spot on. I think that foundational systems component is sometimes easy to overlook when thinking about what new incentives we want to introduce. I always think about like, okay, well, how can we monitor that? How can we track performance? Do we have the right data that we need to roll that out? So I would just echo what Brian said there. For us too, the evolution has been a lot about like evolving partner types at Barracuda. We came from, we're 20 years in the channel business, so obviously have seen that resale motion through and through. And now we're kind of dealing with this evolution of those resellers now becoming managed service providers, managed security service providers, and how do we incentivize that different role of partner in that sense? On the resale side, I think it's certainly heavier on the spiffs and rebates, but then I also think for our MSPs, what are those non-cash incentives that we can start to introduce? And we see their, technical enablement, certification, specializations recognition has been a great incentive for the managed service space. I'd also say on the back end side, I know Brian mentioned like what are those pre-sales activities and then the post-sales. Us in the SaaS space, obviously the customer retention piece is key for us, and we've now adapted our rebate program to focus on all of those different journeys within the customer life cycle. So our rebate program today for our partners is designed around the layer model, if you've heard of that customer success framework, where we recognize partners with different levels of rebates, from landing that new opportunity, upselling that new opportunity, cross-selling to another product in our portfolio, and then managing on-time renewals and retention. So I think also there's a piece of that that looks at the entire life cycle of the customer incentivizing, not just the first meeting, deal registration, and opportunity close. What does it look like after that?
Yeah, excellent. Sean, anything to add to that?
Yeah, I think obviously Brian touched on a key point there, and I suppose even from my view of the world from an automation perspective, like the whole data piece is kind of key, and I'll probably talk to that in a bit more detail here shortly. But I think without the data, both from a monitoring perspective, but also from the performance perspective, like you need your data to be able to make an informed decision in relation to what do you need to actually put in place. What is it? Do you go after a particular behavior at an individual level? Do you go more for the partner entity level? What are the data points, and what do those data points tell you about your partner ecosystem, and what is actually going to move the needle within your partner base? So without that data, and sometimes it is challenging because that data may not be at hand, but you do need to focus on the data because that will influence what you put in play. And it's not just your own internal data. Once you stand something up, be it a spiff or a rebate, don't ignore the partner side of the house. What's the feedback? That is a different type of data set, but it is an important data set because if they're not happy with something, they'll tell you about it pretty quickly. Or if it's not getting the traction that you expected for whatever reason, they'll tell you about it. So again, there's lots of different angles on the data side, which again I'll probably get into in a bit more detail, but it is a fundamental.